Sarajevo, 1994. Winter had tightened its grip on the war-torn city. The snow fell in hypnotic patterns, reducing visibility to mere yards. Through the swirling white, the bombed-out skeleton of what had once been an apartment building stood like a monument to human cruelty. On the sixth floor, a figure lay motionless among the debris. Major James Blackwood hadn't moved for 6 hours. His body, wrapped in a weathered ghillie suit dusted with snow, had become part of the rubble. Only his eyes moved, tracking his target through the Schmidt and Bender PM2, 5 to 25 56mm scope mounted on his M24 sniper weapon system. His breath formed small clouds in the freezing air as he followed a precise rhythm. Inhale, hold half. Exhale, partially, hold. 800 meters away, through the tempest, a Serbian sniper adjusted his position in an abandoned office building. This man had claimed 17 civilian lives in the past week alone. Women gathering water, children crossing streets, aid workers distributing food. Each life ended with mechanical precision. Wind shift, 3 o'clock, approximately 12 knots, whispered Captain Michael Anderson, Blackwood's spotter, his voice barely audible above the howl of the wind. Blackwood made the mental calculations instantaneously. Wind speed, barometric pressure, bullet drop, spin drift, and even the subtle curvature of the Earth. Variables most shooters never considered. Target moving to window, presenting right profile, Anderson continued, his eye never leaving the high-powered spotting scope. Range confirmed at 817 meters. Blackwood's finger curled around the trigger as he inhaled deeply. The crosshairs settled on the distant silhouette. His heartbeat slowed. The world narrowed to this single moment of perfect focus. His finger applied pressure to the trigger, a slow, deliberate squeeze requiring exactly 4 pounds of pressure. The rifle barked. The 175-grain match-grade round cut through the gusting snow, maintaining its trajectory despite the crosswinds that would have deflected a lesser shot. 817 meters away, the Serbian sniper fell. Target down, Anderson confirmed. Clean shot. Sniper Alley just got a little safer. Blackwood began disassembling his rifle with practiced efficiency, his weathered hands moving with mechanical precision. No emotion crossed his face as he packed away the tools of his trade. Evac in 15, Anderson said, already gathering their observation logs. Mission complete. Another ghost story for a war filled with shadows. Boston, 2023. 29 years later. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead at the Liberty Range, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. Dr. Sarah Anderson adjusted her stance, raising her pistol toward the paper target 25 yards away. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air as she focused on her breathing. At 28, her slender frame and intelligent eyes gave little indication of the determination that had brought her to this place 3 times weekly for the past 2 years. A data analyst specializing in pattern recognition for a private security firm by day, she found clarity at the shooting range that was missing from her world of algorithms and spreadsheets. Each shot required the same precision and focus that had attracted her to mathematics. Each squeeze of the trigger was a momentary escape from the emptiness that had followed her father's passing. Her shots formed a respectable group on the target, though not as tight as she wanted. You're fighting your breath instead of working with it. The voice came from the lane beside hers. Sarah turned to see an older man with silver hair and steady hands examining her target. His posture suggested military training, though he wore civilian clothes. Nothing about him was remarkable except his eyes. They held the calm intensity of someone who had seen too much and learned to live with it. Your grouping is decent, he continued, but you're treating each shot as an isolated event rather than part of a continuous process. Sarah studied him carefully. The range had its share of older veterans who freely offered advice, some welcome, some not. But something about this man's quiet confidence caught her attention. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "James Blackwood," he replied, his grip firm but brief. His accent was pure Boston, but something in his pronunciation suggested time spent elsewhere. As he demonstrated a breathing technique Sarah had never encountered, she noticed small details. The way he handled his weapon with unconscious precision, how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, the weathered hands that moved with deliberate economy. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" she asked after trying his technique, surprised by the immediate improvement in her accuracy. Blackwood packed his range bag, his movements methodical. "Different places, different times," he said, shouldering his case. "Same time next week." Sarah found herself nodding, though she wasn't sure why. There was something about James Blackwood that made her need to learn more, not just about shooting, but about the quiet intensity that surrounded him like armor. At the front desk, Thomas Reynolds, the elderly range manager, watched Blackwood leave. His expression shifted when Sarah approached. "I see you met James," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "He gave me some shooting tips," Sarah replied. "Seems knowledgeable." Thomas glanced toward the door where Blackwood had exited. "That man knows more about precision shooting than anyone I've ever met," he said quietly. "And I spent 20 years in the service." Before Sarah could ask more, Master Sergeant Greg Patterson interrupted. In his mid-40s with a SEAL's build and a former operator's swagger, Patterson had appointed himself Sarah's unofficial mentor since she'd started coming to the range. "I saw the old man talking to you," Patterson said, leaning against the counter. "I'd be careful about taking advice from strangers. Some of these guys think watching war movies makes them experts." "His grouping was tighter than anything I've seen you shoot," Thomas remarked mildly, causing Patterson to straighten up. "Who is he anyway?" Patterson asked. "Never seen him around before." "Just a member," Thomas replied, suddenly busy with paperwork. "Been coming here about a month." As Sarah drove home, her mind kept returning to Blackwood's instructions. The simple adjustments he'd suggested had immediately improved her accuracy. What else could he teach her? The following week, Sarah arrived at the range to find Blackwood already there, methodically setting up his equipment. Unlike other shooters with their tactical gear and customized weapons, his setup was simple, even austere. His rifle showed signs of heavy use but was immaculately maintained. "You came back," he observed without looking up. "You said same time next week," Sarah replied. Blackwood nodded once, continuing his preparations. Sarah set up in the adjacent lane, conscious of his presence. As she prepared to shoot, she attempted to implement the breathing technique he had shown her. "Your stance is wrong," Blackwood said quietly. Sarah paused, waiting for more instruction. But Blackwood had already returned to his own shooting. His first 5 shots formed a group so tight it looked like a single hole. "Are you going to elaborate?" she finally asked. Blackwood set his rifle down and moved behind her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her positioning. When Sarah nodded, he made small adjustments to her stance, explaining each modification with precision. "Your body needs to absorb recoil naturally. Fighting against it creates inconsistency." His hands were impersonal but confident as he shifted her elbow slightly. As he reached across to adjust her grip, Sarah noticed a distinctive scar on his forearm, partially concealed by his sleeve. It looked like a bullet wound that had healed decades ago. "Were you military?" she asked. Blackwood's hands paused momentarily. "Many people have military service," he said, neither confirming nor denying. "Not like yours," Sarah pressed gently. "The way you move, the way you watch everything, that's not regular military training." Blackwood stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Try it now," he said, ignoring her question. Sarah fired a series of shots, surprised by the improvement. The adjustments felt unnatural at first, but The results were undeniable. Better, Blackwood acknowledged. Now do it again 50 times. Then we'll talk about trigger control. For the next hour, Blackwood guided Sarah through fundamentals of marksmanship that went far beyond what Patterson had taught her. He explained concepts in terms of physics and biomechanics, breaking down each element of shooting into its component parts. As they packed up their equipment, Sarah tried again. Where did you serve? Blackwood closed his case deliberately. The military teaches you how to shoot. It doesn't teach you how to see. See what? Sarah asked. Everything that affects your shot. Wind patterns, light variations, terrain features, your own heartbeat. Blackwood shouldered his bag. Most importantly, it doesn't teach you when not to shoot. Something in his tone suggested personal experience. Will you show me more next week? Sarah asked. Blackwood studied her for a moment. Why do you come here, Sarah? What are you looking for? The question caught her off guard. Other range regulars had asked about her hobby, but none had questioned her motive so directly. My father taught me basic shooting before he died, she said finally. Coming here makes me feel connected to him somehow. It was more than she'd intended to share, but something about Blackwood's directness demanded honesty. Blackwood nodded, as though her answer confirmed something. Next week, he agreed. Bring a notebook. There's math involved. As he walked away, Patterson approached from the observation area. Making friends with the old-timer? He asked, his tone suggesting disapproval. He's helping me improve my technique, Sarah replied. I could help with your technique, Patterson offered. I'm a certified instructor. That guy is just some random retiree. I appreciate that, Greg, but I'm curious what he has to teach. Patterson's expression hardened slightly. Suit yourself. Just saying we don't know anything about him. Later that evening, Sarah searched online for information about military snipers in Bosnia. The search yielded articles about the siege of Sarajevo, where Serbian forces had surrounded the city for nearly 4 years. Snipers had targeted civilians crossing streets, waiting in breadlines, or simply living their lives. The articles mentioned American involvement but provided few details about specific operations or personnel. One photo showed civilians running across an intersection dubbed Sniper Alley, where marksmen positioned in high-rise buildings had clear fields of fire. Sarah stared at the image, trying to imagine the terror of daily life under such conditions. Had Blackwood been there? Had he been one of the countermeasures deployed against such tactics? Her search for James Blackwood Military yielded thousands of unrelated results. If he had been involved in special operations, his name wouldn't appear in public records anyway. Sarah closed her laptop, more intrigued than before. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Every Tuesday evening, Blackwood would arrive at the range precisely at 7 hour, and for 2 hours he would guide Sarah through increasingly advanced marksmanship principles. His teaching style was unusual. He never directly demonstrated or provided easy answers. Instead, he would present concepts, ask questions, and occasionally correct her technique with minimal intervention. Precision isn't about the shot, he explained during one session. It's about everything that happens before the shot. 90% of marksmanship happens before you touch the trigger. He taught Sarah to read subtle wind indicators, to calculate bullet drop across various distances, to understand how temperature and humidity affected ballistics. These weren't typical lessons for recreational shooting, but Sarah absorbed them eagerly, recognizing their basis in the mathematics she used daily. Patterson continued to watch their sessions with poorly concealed skepticism. He's teaching you military sniper techniques, he commented, after witnessing Blackwood explain range estimation using mil-dot reticles. Not exactly useful for target shooting. I find it interesting, Sarah replied. What do you even know about this guy? Patterson persisted. Have you checked his background? For all you know, he could be some washed-up wannabe. Sarah had wondered the same, but Blackwood's knowledge was too precise, too practiced to be theoretical. He knows what he's talking about, she said firmly. I'm just saying, be careful, Patterson warned. Some of these old guys like to impress pretty young women with war stories. Sarah bristled at the implication. He hasn't told me a single war story. In fact, he barely talks about himself at all. Which was true. Despite weeks of training together, Blackwood remained an enigma. He deflected personal questions with practiced ease, turning conversations back to marksmanship principles or philosophical aspects of shooting that Sarah hadn't considered. A bullet knows only physics, he told her once. Your job is to understand physics better than everyone else. 6 months into their unusual mentorship, Sarah began noticing details about Blackwood that didn't fit the profile of a typical shooting enthusiast. His equipment was pristine, but showed signs of professional use rather than hobbyist care. His rifle case bore small scratches and wear marks suggesting extensive travel to environments harsher than Boston shooting ranges. During their sessions, Blackwood would sometimes pause mid-sentence, his head tilting slightly, as if listening to sounds no one else could hear. His awareness of his surroundings was absolute. He knew when someone entered the range before doors finished opening, could identify approaching footsteps without turning around, and positioned himself where he always had clear sightlines to exits. You were special operations, weren't you? Sarah asked one evening after watching him automatically check corners upon arrival. Blackwood's hands continued their methodical cleaning of his rifle barrel. Some training stays with you longer than others, he said finally, neither confirming nor denying. That evening, Blackwood introduced Sarah to advanced techniques that seemed far beyond recreational shooting. He taught her to calculate for the Coriolis effect caused by Earth's rotation, a consideration only relevant at extreme distances. When Sarah questioned the practical application, Blackwood simply said, "Precision is precision. Half measures teach bad habits." The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging session when Sarah was struggling with consistency at 75 yards. Frustration affected her breathing, causing her groups to scatter widely. "Tell me about the hardest shot you ever made," she said, hoping his story might contain a lesson for overcoming difficulty. Blackwood set down his rifle and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she had never heard before. Sarajevo, 1994, winter. Target was 800 meters away, moving between buildings, wind gusting unpredictably through the ruins. He paused, his eyes focused somewhere far beyond the range walls. Shot had to be perfect. Many lives depended on it. Sarah felt her breath catch. 800 meters was nearly half a mile, an almost impossible shot under ideal conditions, let alone in urban warfare. One bullet, Blackwood continued quietly. Everything I had learned, everything I had trained for came down to reading the wind between destroyed buildings, calculating the drop through cold air, and trusting that when I squeezed the trigger, the shot would go exactly where it needed to go. "Did you make it?" Sarah asked, though Blackwood's presence suggested he had. "The bullet found its mark," he said simply. But the important thing wasn't the distance or the conditions. It was that everything I had practiced, every small detail I had mastered, came together in that moment. Training becomes instinct, and instinct doesn't fail when everything depends on it. For the remainder of the evening, Blackwood guided Sarah through mental exercises about pressure and focus, about trusting preparation when conditions weren't perfect. Her shooting improved not just in accuracy, but in consistency under stress. Walking to their cars afterward, Sarah realized Blackwood had shared more about his past than in all their previous sessions combined. The revelation that he had been a sniper in one of history's most brutal conflicts recontextualized everything she had learned from him. Every technique, Every small adjustment, every emphasis on precision had been forged in circumstances where failure meant death. "Why are you teaching me?" she asked as they reached the parking lot. Blackwood paused beside his truck, an older model that was immaculately maintained despite its age. "Because knowledge dies with the person who holds it," he said, "and because you listen not just to what is said, but to what is meant." That night, Sarah researched the siege of Sarajevo, learning about the snipers who had terrorized the city and the counter-snipers who had fought to protect civilians. She began to understand that Blackwood's quiet precision and constant awareness weren't quirks of personality, but survival mechanisms developed during years of the most demanding combat imaginable. She also realized that her Tuesday evening lessons had been something far more significant than improving her marksmanship hobby. Blackwood had been passing along skills and knowledge representing decades of experience in the most serious application of their shared craft. 3 nights later, Sarah's phone rang at 2:17 a.m. The hospital's name on the caller ID sent a chill through her before she even answered. "Ms. Anderson," a professional voice asked, "this is Mountain View Emergency Services calling about your brother, Dr. Robert Anderson." Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. "What's happened?" "Your brother was on a wildlife photography expedition in the Rocky Mountains when his group was caught in an unexpected blizzard. They've been reported missing for the past 12 hours. The world seemed to narrow around Sarah as the hospital administrator continued explaining the situation. Search and rescue teams were mobilizing but were hampered by deteriorating weather conditions. Robert's last known position was in a remote area that would be difficult to access even in good weather. As Sarah ended the call, her mind was already racing through options. She needed to get to Colorado immediately. She needed to join the search efforts. She needed someone who understood how to operate in harsh conditions, someone who knew how to track and locate people in difficult terrain. She needed James Blackwood. Pulling over to the side of the road, Sarah called the range. Thomas answered on the third ring. "I need to contact Blackwood," she said without preamble. "It's an emergency." There was a pause on the line. "I don't have his personal information, Sarah. Members' contact details are confidential." "Please," Sarah pressed. "My brother is missing in the mountains. Blackwood has the skills to help find him." Another pause. "I can't give you his information," Thomas repeated, then more quietly. "But I might be able to get a message to him. Tell him Sarah needs his help. My brother's lost in the Rockies during a blizzard. I'm flying to Colorado tonight." She provided the name of the search coordination center. "Please, Thomas. It's life or death." "I'll see what I can do," Thomas promised. "But Sarah, be prepared. Men like Blackwood, they don't always want to be found." The flight to Colorado stretched Sarah's nerves to their breaking point. Every minute felt like an hour as the plane crawled across the country, carrying her toward uncertainty. Her brother Robert had now been missing for 16 hours in temperatures well below freezing. Search and rescue statistics echoed in her mind. After 24 hours in such conditions, survival rates plummeted. Colonel Richard Collins, the search and rescue coordinator, met her at the airport. A weathered man in his 50s with the compact build of a career mountaineer, he conveyed quiet competence as he briefed her on the drive to base camp. "Your brother's team was documenting mountain goat migration patterns when the storm hit," Collins explained. "They had satellite communications, but the equipment failed yesterday morning. Last known position puts them here." He gestured to a map on his tablet, indicating a remote valley high in the mountains. "What are their chances?" Sarah asked directly. Collins didn't sugarcoat it. "Robert is an experienced outdoorsman. If the team found shelter, they could survive several days, but this storm is the worst we've seen in years. Search conditions are nearly impossible." "Nearly impossible isn't the same as impossible," Sarah said firmly. Collins nodded, respecting her resolve. "We have teams on standby, but visibility is near zero. Even our helicopter pilots can't fly in these conditions. Sarah studied the map, applying the terrain analysis techniques Blackwood had taught her. What about accessing from this ridgeline? She asked, pointing to an elevated position overlooking the valley. Collins looked surprised. That's a technical climb under good conditions. Nobody's going up there in this weather. I might know someone who could, Sarah said quietly. Collins gave her a skeptical look, but continued driving toward base camp. Sarah checked her phone for the 20th time. Still no word from Blackwood. Had Thomas been unable to reach him, or had Blackwood simply chosen not to respond? Base camp consisted of several large tents, housing communications equipment, medical supplies, and a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with search grids and terrain features. Rescue personnel moved with the focused efficiency of professionals accustomed to life-or-death situations. Sarah was providing details about Robert's equipment and training when a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A figure stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders and silver hair. Despite the civilian clothing, James Blackwood carried himself with unmistakable military bearing. His eyes found Sarah immediately. "I heard you need some specialized assistance," he said simply. Relief washed over her. "You came." "You asked," Blackwood replied, as if that explained everything. Collins approached cautiously. "Mr. Blackwood, I presume? Sarah mentioned you might be able to help, but I should warn you this is a professional operation. We appreciate civilian support, but—" "Show me your maps," Blackwood interrupted, already moving toward the command table. His tone wasn't rude, but carried the natural authority of someone accustomed to taking charge in crisis. As Collins began explaining the search parameters, Blackwood studied the topographical displays with practiced precision. His fingers traced routes across the terrain, eyes narrowing at key features. Sarah recognized the same analytical focus she'd seen during their training sessions. "Your conventional approach routes are compromised by avalanche risk," Blackwood stated, pointing to several slopes. "The valley is essentially a bowl that will channel the storm. Visibility at ground level will be non-existent." Collins frowned. "That's why we're waiting for conditions to improve." "By then, it will be too late," Blackwood said matter-of-factly. He indicated a ridgeline above the valley. "This position provides visual coverage of 80% of the search area. 2 observers with proper equipment could monitor for any signs of your missing team." "That position is inaccessible," Collins objected. "It's over 11,000 feet with technical climbing sections." Blackwood regarded him steadily. "Not inaccessible, just difficult." "Even if someone could reach that position, what good would observation do? Visibility is less than 50 yards in the valley." "Heat signatures," Blackwood explained. "Proper equipment can detect them even through weather. Your team would have built some form of shelter that creates a thermal difference." Collins looked skeptical. "What equipment are you talking about?" Blackwood opened his bag and removed a compact scope. "Military-grade thermal imaging, effective range of over a mile in optimal conditions." "That's not standard civilian equipment," Collins noted, eyeing Blackwood with newfound suspicion. "No," Blackwood agreed without elaboration. "It's not." Sarah watched the exchange with growing impatience. "Every minute we debate this, Robert and his team get colder. If Blackwood says he can reach that position, he can." Collins rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Even if I approve this plan, which I'm not saying I am, we'd need at least 4 experienced climbers to attempt that ascent safely." "2," Blackwood corrected. "Sarah and myself." "Absolutely not," Collins said firmly. "Sarah's a civilian with no alpine experience." "She has the necessary skills," Blackwood insisted. Sarah stepped forward. "I've been training with Blackwood for months. I can do this." Collins looked between them, clearly conflicted. "What exactly is your background, Mr. Blackwood?" Sarah mentioned military experience, but this operation requires specific expertise. Blackwood met his gaze evenly. I spent 20 years in specialized reconnaissance operations, including extreme environment insertion. I've conducted similar missions in the Hindu Kush at higher elevations than this. If anyone can reach that position safely, I can. The quiet confidence in his voice seemed to reach Collins. And you're willing to stake Sarah's life on that assessment? I wouldn't bring her if I didn't believe she could handle it, Blackwood replied. But ultimately, it's her decision. All eyes turned to Sarah. She felt the weight of their gazes but didn't hesitate. My brother is out there. I'm going. Collins sighed heavily. Against my better judgment, I'll allow you to attempt this, but I need constant radio contact, and you follow my orders regarding weather conditions. If I say abort, you abort immediately. Understood, Blackwood agreed. We'll need technical climbing gear, cold weather equipment, and emergency medical supplies. As the team assembled their equipment, Collins pulled Sarah aside. Who is this guy, really? His equipment and knowledge aren't standard civilian issue. Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to share about Blackwood's mysterious background. He's someone who knows how to find people who don't want to be found, she said finally. Or in this case, people who very much want to be found. Collins didn't look entirely satisfied, but nodded. Keep your radio on at all times. The mountain doesn't care about experience or confidence. It kills the unprepared regardless. 2 hours later, Sarah stood at the base of the ridge, looking up at the imposing climb ahead. Snow continued to fall steadily, reducing visibility and making the ascent even more treacherous. Dressed in technical climbing gear and cold weather clothing, she felt both prepared and woefully inadequate for the task ahead. Blackwood checked her equipment one final time, his movements efficient and thorough. Remember what I taught you about maintaining your core temperature, he said. Once you start getting cold, it's already too late. Prevention, not reaction. Sarah nodded, adjusting her pack. I'm ready. Blackwood secured his rifle case across his back. The specialized thermal scope was their best hope for locating Robert's team in the whiteout conditions. Stay within 5 meters of me at all times, he instructed. Follow my exact path. The snow can mask crevasses and unstable terrain. Just like you taught me about moving through contested territory, Sarah said. A ghost of a smile crossed Blackwood's face. Similar principles, different consequences. He activated his radio. Overwatch 1 beginning ascent now. Copy that, Overwatch, Collins replied. Weather report shows intensification in approximately 4 hours. That's your window. Understood. Blackwood began climbing with methodical precision, testing each handhold before committing his weight. Sarah followed closely, mimicking his movements. The initial slope was manageable, but she knew the real challenge would come higher up where the ridge narrowed and steepened. For the first hour, they climbed in silence, conserving energy and focusing on the physical demands. The falling snow made visibility increasingly difficult, but Blackwood navigated with uncanny confidence, as though he had memorized the terrain from the maps. During a brief rest on a small ledge, Sarah finally asked the question that had been pressing on her mind. How did you get here so quickly? I only called Thomas last night. Blackwood took a sip from his water bottle, preventing it from freezing by keeping it inside his jacket. I was already on my way when Thomas reached out. How? I have certain arrangements in place, people who contact me when specific parameters are triggered. Parameters like what? Blackwood adjusted his gloves. Your name appearing in emergency response communications, missing persons reports involving wilderness areas. A few other markers. Sarah stared at him, processing this revelation. You've been monitoring me? Not monitoring, just maintaining awareness. Why? Sarah pressed. Why would you set up a system to track emergencies involving me? Blackwood was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable in the falling snow. "Let's keep moving," he said finally. "We're losing daylight." The climb grew steeper, requiring full concentration. In some sections, Blackwood set anchors and safety lines, guiding Sarah through technical passages that would have been challenging even in good weather. Despite the rigorous physical demands, Sarah found herself drawing on Blackwood's training, controlled breathing, efficient movement, maintaining focus despite discomfort. 3 hours into the climb, they reached a particularly exposed section. The ridge narrowed to a knife edge with precipitous drops on both sides. The wind had intensified, blowing snow horizontally across their path and threatening their balance. "Stay roped to me," Blackwood instructed, securing a line between them. "One step at a time. Don't look down. Focus only on your next movement." Sarah nodded, steeling herself. As they inched across the narrow ridge, a sudden gust of wind caught her momentarily, throwing off her balance. Her foot slipped, sending small stones clattering down the mountainside. Before panic could set in, Blackwood's voice cut through the howling wind. "Breathe, Sarah. Find your center. You control your body, not the mountain." The words echoed their training sessions. Sarah regulated her breathing, readjusted her footing, and continued forward. When they reached safer ground, Blackwood checked her condition with professional detachment. "Your performance is satisfactory," he said, which Sarah recognized as high praise from him. "Another hour to the observation position." As they resumed climbing, Sarah noticed Blackwood moving with increasing stiffness. During their next brief rest, she caught him massaging his left knee. "Old injury?" she asked. Blackwood nodded curtly. "Bosnia. Building collapsed during an extraction. Nothing serious." "You never mentioned it during our training." "It wasn't relevant to your instruction." Blackwood scanned the terrain ahead. "We're almost there. The final approach is the most challenging. Stay especially close." The last section required full climbing technique, with Blackwood setting anchors and Sarah following his lead. By the time they reached the observation position, a relatively flat area protected by an overhanging rock face, both were breathing heavily from exertion. Blackwood immediately began unpacking his equipment while Sarah established radio contact with base camp. "Overwatch 1 to base. We've reached the observation position." "Copy that. Overwatch," Collins replied, poorly concealed surprise in his voice. "Honestly, I didn't expect you'd make it. Status report? Both intact. Beginning observation operations now." Blackwood had assembled his rifle and attached the thermal scope. Despite their mission being observation only, Sarah understood why he'd brought the full system. The rifle provided a stable platform for the sophisticated optics, allowing for steady, extended surveillance. "Start systematic grid search," Blackwood instructed, showing Sarah how to use a second set of optics he'd brought. "Scan each sector thoroughly before moving to the next. Look for any heat signature that doesn't match the natural environment." They worked in silence, methodically searching the valley below. The snowfall had intensified, creating a white curtain that would have made conventional observation impossible. But through the thermal equipment, the landscape appeared as varying shades of blue and black, with warmer objects showing as yellow and red. After 40 minutes of searching, Sarah noticed something unusual in her sector. "Blackwood, I've got something. Grid reference H7 near the eastern slope. It's faint, but there's definitely a heat source." Blackwood shifted his position, training his scope on the area Sarah indicated. He studied it carefully, making minute adjustments to the optics. "Good catch," he said finally. "That's artificial. Too consistent for natural formation. Too structured for wildlife. Could be a shelter." Sarah felt her heart rate accelerate. "Robert, possibly?" "We need to confirm." Blackwood contacted base camp, providing the coordinates and description. Can you maintain observation while we dispatch a ground team? Collins asked. Affirmative. But the storm is intensifying. Your window for extraction is closing rapidly. Understood. Ground team is mobilizing now. Estimated arrival at target location in 3 hours. Blackwood checked the weather conditions, frowning. The storm front is advancing faster than predicted. Your team may not reach the location before conditions become untenable. There was a pause on the radio. What are you suggesting, Overwatch? Blackwood considered for a moment. We need to guide them along an alternate approach. The standard route will put them directly in the path of the advancing front. You can see the weather patterns from your position? I can read the cloud formations and wind patterns. The storm is channeling through the Northwest Pass, not the valley approach as expected. Your team needs to come in from the Southeast Ridge. Collins sounded skeptical. That route adds at least an hour to their approach. The standard route will add at least a day when your team gets stranded in the whiteout, Blackwood replied bluntly. Your call, but I'm telling you what I'm seeing from here. After a long pause, Collins responded. All right, Overwatch. We'll redirect the ground team as you suggest. Maintain observation and update if conditions change. As they continued monitoring the heat signature, Sarah noticed Blackwood studying her with an intensity that went beyond professional assessment. What is it? She asked. Blackwood seemed to consider his words carefully. You're performing exceptionally well under pressure. Not everyone can function effectively in these conditions, especially on their first alpine operation. I had a good teacher, Sarah replied. Blackwood nodded, almost to himself. Yes, you did. There was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't referring to himself. Before Sarah could question him further, Blackwood abruptly tensed, his attention returning to his scope. Movement at the target location. Someone has emerged from the shelter. Sarah quickly trained her optics on the area. Through the thermal imaging, she could clearly see a human figure moving slowly around what now appeared to be a makeshift snow cave. That's gotta be one of them, she said, excitement building. They're alive. One confirmed survivor, Blackwood relayed to base camp, appears mobile but moving with difficulty, possibly hypothermic or injured. Copy that, Overwatch. Ground team is still 2 hours out on the revised route. Blackwood's expression darkened as he studied the weather patterns. They're not going to make it before this front hits. The survivor is attempting to gather materials, likely to reinforce their shelter. They know what's coming. Sarah watched the lone figure struggling through the deep snow, her heart aching with the knowledge it could be her brother. There has to be something we can do. Blackwood was silent for a long moment, weighing options with the calculated precision she had come to recognize. Finally, he made a decision. Base, this is Overwatch 1. I'm going to provide direct guidance to your ground team while proceeding to an intermediate position. Current conditions require more immediate intervention. Negative, Overwatch, Collins responded immediately. Maintain your position. Conditions between you and the target are deteriorating rapidly. Which is precisely why your team needs direct guidance, Blackwood replied firmly. They won't reach the target without it. Sarah realized what Blackwood was proposing. You're going down there? That's insanely dangerous. Blackwood met her gaze steadily. Sometimes the only way to save a life is to risk your own. He turned back to the radio. Base, Sarah will maintain observation position and communications. I'll establish an intermediate relay point to guide your team through the approach. After several moments of argument, Collins reluctantly agreed. Blackwood began repacking his essential equipment, leaving the observation gear with Sarah. Maintain regular radio contact, he instructed. Continue systematic observation of the target. If you spot any changes, especially additional survivors emerging, report immediately. I should go with you, Sarah protested. Blackwood shook his head. Your brother needs you alive. That means you stay here where it's relatively protected. He placed a hand on her shoulder. This is what I trained you for, Sarah. Trust your preparation. Before she could argue further, Blackwood secured his gear and prepared to descend toward the valley. Why are you doing this? Sarah asked. Why risk your life for someone you've never met? Blackwood paused, snow gathering on his shoulders as he considered her question. Because 29 years ago, someone did the same for me. Without further explanation, he began his descent, soon disappearing into the swirling snow. For the next hour, Sarah maintained her observation position, alternating between monitoring the heat signature in the valley and tracking Blackwood's progress through intermittent radio contact. The storm continued to intensify, reducing visibility to near zero, except through the thermal equipment. Overwatch 2 to Overwatch 1, she called, using the call signs they had established. Target status unchanged. One figure occasionally emerging from shelter, then returning inside. Copy that, Blackwood's voice replied, partially obscured by static. I've established intermediate position. Visual on the southeast approach. Ground team is still 90 minutes out, but making good progress. Sarah adjusted her position, trying to find a more protected angle against the increasingly fierce wind. As she shifted, her scope briefly passed over a different section of the valley, and a flash of heat caught her attention. Wait, she called into the radio. I've got another signature approximately 200 meters west of the primary target. Very faint, possibly buried under snow. Can you confirm it's human? Blackwood asked, his voice instantly alert. Sarah adjusted her optics, focusing intently on the anomaly. Thermal pattern is consistent with a partially covered human form. No movement detected. Relay coordinates to base, Blackwood instructed, then maintain observation on both targets. Sarah provided the new coordinates to Collins, who confirmed they would divert part of the rescue team to investigate. Overwatch 1. I'm proceeding toward the new target, Blackwood informed her. It's on my direct path to the ground team. Be careful, Sarah urged. Thermal signature is weak. Could be. I know what it could be, Blackwood interrupted gently. Keep watching the primary shelter. There may be more survivors we haven't spotted yet. Sarah continued her surveillance, fighting against the growing anxiety as the minutes ticked by. The storm had now reached full intensity, battering her position with wind and snow. Even in her protected location, the cold was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. 30 minutes passed with no communication from Blackwood. Sarah was about to call him when his voice finally came through, strained but controlled. Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2. I've reached the secondary target. Status? Sarah asked immediately. There was a pause before Blackwood responded. Male, early 30s. Matches your brother's description from the photo you showed me. Alive but severely hypothermic. He was separated from the main group during the initial storm. Sarah felt her heart constrict. Robert? Is he conscious? Semi-conscious. I've administered emergency treatment and am preparing him for evacuation. Blackwood's voice remained professional, but Sarah could hear the underlying urgency. Ground team needs to prioritize this position. Subject won't survive another hour in these conditions without medical intervention. Sarah relayed the information to base camp, who confirmed they would redirect their primary resources toward Blackwood's position. What about the shelter? Sarah asked. The other survivor? Maintain observation, Blackwood instructed. I've established contact with the ground team. They're 20 minutes from my position. Once Robert is stabilized, we'll proceed to the primary shelter. The next half hour was the longest of Sarah's life. Through her scope, she watched the distant figure at the snow shelter continue to move around periodically, seemingly unaware that help was approaching. Meanwhile, Blackwood's location showed two heat signatures huddled together, one significantly weaker than the other. Finally, Blackwood's voice came through again. Ground team has reached our position. Medical personnel are treating your brother now. prognosis is cautiously positive. Relief washed over Sarah, followed immediately by renewed concern for the other survivor. What about the person at the shelter? I'm proceeding there with part of the ground team now, Blackwood replied. Maintain your observation and guide us if the subject moves. Sarah watched through her scope as several heat signatures began moving toward the snow shelter. They were still approximately 15 minutes away when she noticed something alarming. Overwatch 1. The subject is leaving the shelter, moving west away from your approach. Can you guide us? Blackwood asked immediately. Subject is approximately 200 meters west of the shelter now, moving slowly but steadily. They appear to be following some kind of trail or path. Blackwood relayed this information to the team with him. Sarah could hear the increasing strain in his voice, evidence of the physical toll the harsh conditions were taking. We've adjusted course, he reported. Visibility at ground level is 0. Your guidance is our only reference point. Sarah focused entirely on tracking the moving figure, providing continuous updates on direction and approximate speed. Despite the subject's head start, the rescue team was moving faster and gradually closing the distance. They're approximately 50 meters ahead of you now, Sarah informed them, moving into an area with large rock formations. I see the rocks, Blackwood confirmed. Any movement from the subject? They've stopped. Appear to be taking shelter behind one of the larger formations. Copy that. Through her scope, Sarah watched as the rescue team approached the position where the figure had stopped. There appeared to be some kind of interaction, though from her distance she couldn't discern details. Several tense minutes passed before Blackwood's voice returned. We've made contact. Second survivor is Dr. Elena Reyes, the team biologist. She's mobile but moderately hypothermic. The rest of their team established the snow shelter after becoming separated from Robert and Elena during the initial storm. How many at the shelter? 2 more, according to Elena. Both alive but in worse condition. We're proceeding there now. Sarah maintained her observation position as the rescue expanded, providing periodic updates to base camp. Despite the success of the operation so far, Collins remained concerned about the deteriorating weather. We need to extract all personnel before this front fully hits, he emphasized, including you, Sarah. The observation phase is complete. Begin your descent along the eastern route we discussed. A team will meet you halfway. Not until everyone is accounted for, Sarah replied firmly. That's an order, not a request, Collins insisted. Blackwood and the ground team have the situation under control. Your brother is already being evacuated to medical facilities. There's no reason for you to remain in a dangerous position. Sarah was about to argue further when Blackwood's voice joined the conversation. Sarah, he's right. Begin your descent now. I'll meet you at the extraction point once the remaining survivors are secure. Something in his tone made her hesitate. You're not telling me everything. There was a pause before Blackwood responded. The situation is more complex than anticipated. The trail to the shelter has been partially buried by a small avalanche. We're having to establish a new approach. Sarah studied the thermal images, noticing that the rescue team did indeed appear to be moving in a circuitous route, rather than directly toward the shelter. I can guide you through it, she offered. I have the best vantage point. Negative, Blackwood replied firmly. You've done your part. Now follow orders and begin your descent. Reluctantly, Sarah began packing her equipment. As she prepared to leave, she took one final scan of the area with her thermal optics. What she saw made her freeze. Blackwood, stop! There's unstable snowpack directly above your current position. I can see the temperature differential along the slope. Classic avalanche conditions. There was a moment of silence before Blackwood responded. Can you guide us around it? Turn northeast immediately. There's a stable rock formation about 75 meters from your position that should provide safe passage. Through her scope, Sarah watched as the heat signatures changed direction, moving toward the formation she'd identified. They had covered about half the distance when she noticed movement along the slope above them. Move faster! The slope is shifting! For several heart-stopping moments, Sarah watched as the rescue team sprinted towards safety. The snow above them began sliding in slow motion, then accelerated into a full avalanche. The last heat signature, Blackwood, she was certain, barely reached the protected area before the massive snow thundered past. "Overwatch 1, report!" Sarah called frantically. "Blackwood, are you there?" Static filled the channel before his voice finally responded, breathless but intact. "We're secure." "Good call, Sarah. That's twice today your observation has saved lives." Relief flooded through her, followed by fierce pride. Blackwood's training had prepared her for this moment, enabling her to see what others missed and act decisively under pressure. "Now, will you please begin your descent?" Blackwood added, a rare note of warmth entering his voice. "Copy that, Overwatch 1, Sarah replied, smiling despite the cold and fatigue. "Beginning descent now." 6 hours later, Sarah sat beside her brother's hospital bed. Robert was sleeping peacefully, his condition upgraded from critical to stable. The doctors had assured her that despite severe hypothermia and minor frostbite, he would make a full recovery. The door opened quietly, and Blackwood entered. He had changed into dry clothes, but exhaustion lined his face. A medical bandage wrapped his left hand, evidence of an injury he hadn't mentioned during the operation. "How is he?" Blackwood asked, keeping his voice low. "Better," Sarah replied. "They're saying he'll be fine." She studied Blackwood with newfound understanding. "You're hurt." Blackwood glanced at his bandaged hand dismissively. "Superficial. Happened during the final evacuation." "You saved his life?" "We saved his life," Blackwood corrected. "Your observation skills made the difference. You spotted both your brother and the unstable snowpack that could have buried the rescue team." Sarah nodded, accepting the acknowledgement of her contribution. They found the other two members of the research team, both alive, thanks to the shelter they built. Blackwood took a seat in the corner of the room, his posture alert despite his obvious fatigue. Even here in the safety of a hospital, he positioned himself with clear sightlines to the door and windows. Old habits, Sarah realized, ingrained through years of operating in hostile environments. "There's something I need to ask you," she said after a moment of silence. "You told me you were already on your way when Thomas contacted you. You said you had systems in place to alert you if my name appeared in emergency communications." She met his gaze directly. "Why would you do that?" Blackwood was quiet for a long time, weighing his response. Finally, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a worn photograph, handing it to Sarah. The image showed a group of soldiers in desert camouflage standing in front of a helicopter. Sarah immediately recognized a much younger Blackwood among them. But it was another face that caught her attention, a face she knew intimately from family photos. "That's my father," she whispered, shocked. "You knew my father?" Blackwood nodded. "Captain Michael Anderson. We served together on multiple operations. He was my spotter during the Sarajevo mission I told you about." Sarah stared at the photograph, trying to process this revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Your father and I were part of a unit that officially didn't exist," Blackwood explained. "Our operations remain classified even decades later. When I first saw you at the range, I recognized the resemblance immediately. So all this time, the training, the lessons, it was because of my father?" Blackwood considered his words carefully. "Your father saved my life more than once. When he died, I wasn't there to return the favor." Pain flickered across his face, quickly controlled but undeniably present. "When I saw you at the range, struggling with techniques he had mastered, it felt like an opportunity to honor his memory by passing on what we had learned together." Sarah felt tears forming. "He never talked about his work, Mom said it was classified, but I always sensed there was more he wasn't telling us. Michael was one of the finest soldiers I ever knew, Blackwood said quietly. But more importantly, he was a man of principle. He understood that our skills came with responsibility. Every shot we took was to protect others, never for glory or political advantage. That sounds like him, Sarah smiled through her tears. Always talking about responsibility. Blackwood nodded. He spoke of you often, proudly. When I recognized you at the range, I knew immediately that you had his natural abilities, his eye for detail, his patience, his determination. Why the elaborate training program? Why not just tell me who you were from the beginning? Blackwood's expression grew solemn. Men like me don't suddenly appear in people's lives with stories about classified operations and expect to be welcomed. I needed to earn your trust first, and I needed to be certain you had the temperament for the knowledge I was sharing. Sarah understood then what had been happening over the past 6 months. Blackwood hadn't just been teaching her marksmanship. He'd been evaluating her character, determining whether she deserved to inherit the legacy of skills her father had helped develop. The mission where he died, Sarah said hesitantly. Can you tell me about it? Blackwood's face revealed the conflict within him, the desire to provide closure against a lifetime of operational security. Not everything, he said finally, but enough for you to understand that he died doing exactly what he believed in, protecting innocent lives. For the next hour, Blackwood shared carefully selected details about operations he and Michael Anderson had conducted together. Each story revealed a man devoted to using his extraordinary skills to shield others from harm, often at great personal risk. Through Blackwood's measured words, Sarah began to see a side of her father she had never known. The warrior who had used his precision and patience not for destruction, but for protection. The last thing he said to me, Blackwood concluded quietly, was to look after his family if anything happened to him. I've kept track of you and your brother over the years, from a distance. When Robert disappeared in these mountains, I knew it was time to become more directly involved. Sarah wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the connection between her father, Blackwood, and the skills that had just helped save her brother's life. All this time, you've been teaching me my father's techniques. Blackwood nodded. Some of them. Others were ones we developed together. He was particularly skilled at reading environmental conditions, a talent you clearly inherited. Your observation of the avalanche risk today was exactly the kind of detail he would have spotted. Robert stirred in his hospital bed, drawing their attention. His eyes fluttered open, focusing first on Sarah, then moving to Blackwood with confusion. Who's your friend? He asked groggily. Sarah smiled, taking her brother's hand. Robert, this is James Blackwood. He helped find you on the mountain. Robert studied Blackwood with increasing awareness. You were there? In that storm? That was suicide mission territory. Blackwood shrugged slightly. I've operated in worse. He's being modest, Sarah interjected. He tracked you through a whiteout using thermal imaging, then personally carried you to the medical team. Robert's expression shifted to one of deep gratitude. Thank you doesn't seem adequate. No thanks necessary, Blackwood replied. Your sister did the hard part, spotting your location from nearly a mile away through a snowstorm. Always the overachiever? Robert said with a weak smile toward Sarah. But seriously, how did you even know what to do out there? Last I checked, data analysts don't typically moonlight as mountain rescue specialists. Sarah and Blackwood exchanged a look. It's a long story, she said, one that actually starts with Dad. Robert's eyebrows rose with surprise. Dad? What does he have to do with this? Sarah glanced at Blackwood, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. It turns out Dad's military career was more interesting than we knew, and Mr. Blackwood here was his partner. Robert's eyes widened as he looked between them. No way. Dad was some kind of special ops? As I said, Sarah smiled, It's a long story. One I'm just beginning to learn myself. A nurse entered to check Robert's vital signs, announcing that visiting hours would be ending soon. Blackwood rose from his chair, preparing to leave. "Will I see you next Tuesday?" Sarah asked as they stepped into the hallway. Blackwood studied her thoughtfully. "That depends. Our original training program is essentially complete. You've demonstrated mastery of the fundamental skills." "But there's more to learn," Sarah pressed. "You've only scratched the surface of what you and my father knew." "The question isn't whether there's more to learn," Blackwood replied carefully. "It's whether you understand the responsibility that comes with such knowledge. Your father never used his skills for personal advancement or glory. He saw them as tools for protection, nothing more." Sarah considered his words. "Today, those skills help save 6 lives. That seems like exactly the kind of responsibility my father would have wanted me to embrace." Blackwood nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Tuesday, then. We'll begin advanced applications." He turned to leave but paused. "Your father would have been proud today, not just of what you did, but how you did it." As Sarah watched him walk away, she felt a connection to her father stronger than any she had experienced since his death. Through Blackwood's teaching, a part of Michael Anderson lived on. His skills, his principles, his commitment to using precision as a means of protection rather than destruction. She returned to Robert's room, sitting beside his bed as he drifted back to sleep. Outside the window, snow continued to fall, but the deadly storm had passed. In its wake, Sarah found herself contemplating the path ahead. Blackwood had opened a door to a world her father had inhabited, a world where extraordinary skills carried equally extraordinary responsibilities. The skills that had saved Robert's life today could serve many purposes. Sarah was now certain which path she would choose. Like her father before her, she would use what she had learned to protect, not harm, to create safety rather than fear. The precision her father and Blackwood had mastered wasn't just about hitting targets. It was about making the right choices under pressure, about seeing clearly when others were blinded by chaos, about remaining steady when everything around you was in flux. These were the true lessons of precision that transcended marksmanship. And these were the lessons Sarah would continue to learn, now understanding the legacy she was inheriting.